Stranded: Alien Dawn is back. The brilliant survival cum simulation base building game returns, not only with a whole load of free content since the last time I covered it, but also with its robots and Guardians DLC with a release date of November 7. This update, alongside everything else that this game has to offer, is very special. Let's take a look at it with thanks to Frontier Foundry for sponsoring this video. You'll be able to check out a link at the top of the description below for Stranded: Alien Dawn and its new robots and Guardians DLC. And we might as well just jump straight into it. Here is the beginning of the Guardians sort of scenario. One of 4 scenarios in the game, and in my opinion, frankly, the best one. It is absolutely my favorite. The scenario begins, as you can see, introducing a very special new character. Their name's Hope. And she's kind of a mix between a human and a cyborg, and she'll grow and develop more human tendencies, perhaps as we move through. Here you can see the Guardians scenario. You basically, if you're unfamiliar with Stranded: Alien Dawn, choose a scenario at the start of the game. Pick your map settings, they are all very beautiful. And there are also some really interesting game rules. I love to play around with these. They're a bit of fun, they mess with the rules sort of overall, but they add a nice spice to life. Although in the beginning you might not necessarily be looking for it. If you're unfamiliar with Stranded: Alien Dawn, you are indeed stranded in a world filled with a lot of very fun flora and fauna. And your task, of course, is not only to harness its resources, improve your technology, but also survive. Every one of your survivors has unique skills, traits, behaviors. They interact with one another, and of course they're all trying to survive collectively inside of this world where you start with, as you might expect, fairly humble beginnings, but using the game's very intricate, detailed, fairly easy to use base building mechanics, while of course you gather those precious resources, you should settle right in. Although it's important to note that the settling in will be somewhat difficult, of course, as you move through and progress, survival being a key theme, but it may be most difficult for Hope 9000. Here's Hope doing a little bit of research for me, one of the only things that Hope's able to do in the beginning. Hope has very little in the way of sentience, largely just a machine, but we must protect Hope, because Hope provides an opportunity that most of the other settlers don't. Hope is, of course, machine, and with that we can add improvements or potentially also run into some negative events surrounding Hope as well. There's some really interesting things that play out as you move through. Upgrade Hope, choose certain skill sets that you'd like to focus in on, and maybe leave the rest to the humans. Hope is a little bit different to humans. She maybe won't be looking for a meat stew or a vegetable stew, but instead energy crystals and silicon or fuel, alternatively. You do have to be careful though. If you don't feed Hope, you will fail, as I found out a few times. Hope also, of course, is at risk, just like every other survivor, of perishing, although maybe less so to the natural conditions in and around the world, but the threat is very large. And so, with that threat comes, of course, the need to explore and expand. And I love the way that the game pitches these missions to you. You jump in a hot air balloon, maybe you find a dogfight crash site, maybe you're just exploring, maybe it's a meteorite that's crashed. All of it will help you out, building resources and hopefully building on top of this tech tree, which, again, like a lot of other things in Stranded: Alien Dawn, has seen a huge amount of updates. Your survivors will feed into it, working on research benches as you try and make your way through the 5 tech categories that are on offer, one of them being technological breakthroughs. And when we drill into the detail a little bit before we move through to the big machines, the big guns, and the mechs, I wanted to just highlight the resource system that's at play here. It is fairly easy to use and intuitive, but every single one of these workbenches, stoves, research desks, whatever they may be, can also queue up tasks, feeding resources in, using your hopefully well taken care of survivors to farm these different things, move through your technology, and ultimately keep everybody surviving and thriving. But in order to do that, as we've hinted at already, you're gonna need some defense. And this will probably come in 2 distinct ways, either equipping your survivors with different gear, weapons, plasma rifles, mech robots, you name it, they've got it, or by building up your base defenses with walls and all of that kind of good stuff. But let's now focus in on the actual combat. Here you can see a fleeing Hope, maybe a little short of Hope. She's, of course, being hunted down by these assault units, the G1000s, who will periodically land on this planet and try and take Hope down. You'll need your defenders, of course, well equipped out to defend her, and you can draft them and then manually control them, or set up some automatic defenses and let them play out, not just against, of course, that mechanized threat, that autonomous war machine that's running after you, but also maybe the threats that exist naturally in the world. Building up defenses, one of my favorite things to do, especially with the new build height limit. You can build up some nice towers, make the most of maybe some of your cheaper, maybe on the way out resources as you move through to more advanced things like carbon, for example. Building up a broader defense will also be a crucial part here, and as you would expect from any good base builder, a wonderful and fortified defensive boundary around the outside, whether it be a wall or a fence, is obviously a go-to. Ring fencing a lot of my farmland that I found was particularly useful as well in this update, at least in comparison to how the game used to be around 6 months ago, the last time we checked it out here on the channel. Moving through to the robots part of the robots and guardians though, you're going to need a lot of technology and all of the resources, so make sure that you farm as much as you can, that you explore as much as you possibly can, because all of the metal, all of the circuit boards, the GPUs that you're going to need to produce will require a lot of resource and effort. Here you can see the mech. Finally, I've made it. Not quite the most extreme version, but the first version of the mech. Fairly straightforward. They call it the small one, although it is anything but, particularly in comparison to everybody else who were trying to keep alive in this world. And as I say, the costs are fairly high. The construction time also taking quite a bit of effort here for Yoko as she finishes what is a beautiful construction. Here you can see the machine, once it's done, operates on the map by assigning an owner to it. You can choose any one of your survivors you like, though Hope mightn't be quite so keen on jumping in and manning the mech just yet. And then once you send a survivor to mount it, it is all guns blazing, adding not just extra weaponry to the game, but also extra movement abilities. This leap, for example, meaning that I can build up my defenses, keep myself protected, and then of course either choose to leap over them to attack the enemy, here unfortunately just some poor native wildlife, or alternatively use the machine gun mounted at the front to take them down. This really is when we start to step into the more advanced side of robots and guardians, no longer just guarding Hope in the early stages, but now we're stepping up ourselves and really building into some of the more advanced technology, like laser swords or laser pikes, extra weaponry, carbon fortifications, or maybe you want to step away from the weapons for a moment, maybe upgrade the software on Hope, or get some advanced entertainment like VR sets for your survivors. It will of course be important to keep them happy and healthy, particularly as the search parties keep rolling in, maybe larger and larger as they move through, and maybe bringing some slightly better weapons than they do in the beginning. If, like me, you chose to equip yourself with the plasma sniper rifles at the start, you'll find the first few invasions, at least, not too difficult. But as you start to run out of ammo and resources and look to build your own advanced weaponry, you'll find that maybe that wooden fence you built at the start isn't quite cutting it anymore. Here I am connecting power to my newly built battle drone station, another, of course, new feature in the Robots and Guardians DLC. And as a poor, undefended survivor whose sniper rifle I wanted to keep for a rainy day flees from one of these aggressive attackers, it is, of course, the battle drone to the rescue, mounted on this base station, defending a certain area, of course, in this case, the entrance to my base. It didn't have too much trouble in taking down that foe. Although the same can't really be said for Grayson. Tough time for old Gray. Anyway, back to the base defense side of things. Alongside mechs and drones and robots, we also have some automated weaponry, missile launchers, lasers, and machine guns. These things can be built basically wherever you like. They'll have different ranges depending on which one you're building. They'll require some fairly expensive resources, or at least technical components. So you'll want to make sure that you're building those as quickly as you can inside of this update to make the most of this. Here I'm placing a target area on an unfortunate wild being. Don't worry though, I won't blow up that pig. We'll let that one slide. But setting up this kind of defense is really what you'll need to do to stop the kind of highway moving through your territory, but also to deal with that ever advanced and growing threat as they try and hunt down hope. Your goal is to keep yourself alive. It's important to also note some of the other things that I talked about last time and some new stuff that help to build the world. Here you can see an animal that I've tamed, Pigu, adequately named, trained, and unfortunately also dealt with the lows that come with that, and all of the interesting little game mechanics that are built around it to help make this not just a base builder, not just a survival game, but a world that I feel really connected to. The survivors matter, the pigs matter, and of course, all of this sweet, sweet new gear as part of the Robots and Guardians DLC. I think Stranded Alien Dawn is in a really good place, particularly after this free update and this explosive new DLC. Do check out my link below if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about Stranded Alien Dawn and Robots and Guardians, and I'll see you wonderful people next time.